Hey, I'm live. How's it going, girl? So it is Miguel, your father, and it is the 20th of July, 2019. And I just wanted to look deeply into your eyes, gaze into your eyes, and say, hello, it's me. All right. So, hi, girl. How you doing? So today is the 20th, and last night was the 19th. And last night I went to a lecture. It was at the some Santa Barbara Junior High School theater called the Marjorie Luke Theater, something like that. And there was a presentation given by Jack Canfield. Now, that name may sound vaguely familiar to you, or maybe it won't. But I've heard of this name before many, many times because Jack Canfield, I think, is like the editor of this book series called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And what this book series is about is that it's essentially a lot of short stories that are feel good stories, inspirational stories, stories that describe people's virtues. Um, I'm sorry, but I'm getting a little bit distracted by all the noise outside. There is a lot of people partying hardy out there. I've got noise in the background. I've got people over here. I got sirens going off in the distance. There's a lot of activity in this little town today. Anyway, let me get back to the subject. So yeah, I saw Jack Canfield, the editor of the series. He's also got a book, I think, Chicken Soup for the Soul for Teens, something like that. Now, I've actually not read any of these books. So you might be thinking, why would I go see a lecture or presentation by an editor whose books I've never read? And I can tell you that, I've read inside the self-help genre for many, many years, many, many decades. I mean, I started first reading self-help and self-development books back when I was in high school. In fact, I distinctly remember, I think I was like a sophomore in high school, riding the bus. And while on the bus, I was reading a book by, Pulling Your Own Strings by Wayne Dyer. Yeah, I was reading this book, fully engrossed in it. And hey, now that I think about it, I was your age, a sophomore in high school. That's where you are right now. You're a sophomore in high school. Now, I don't know if you take the bus regularly or not. You may not. But I used to take the bus, and at least I took the bus pretty solidly for the first 2 years that I was in school. And although when my junior and senior year of high school came along, I tended to walk to school a lot just because I liked the walking. I did a lot of walking when I was a kid. So, yeah. So I'll continue with my response. Yeah, so I know about Jack Canfield sort of indirectly through the books because for me, I would walk into a bookstore and I would just go to the self-help section of a bookstore and I would see literally an entire row on the top row of the shelf, just with these Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and literally volume after volume, all across this one large row of the bookshelf. It's just a huge compendium of literature. and and now I think I'm certain I looked in them. I didn't really find what I was looking for. I'm not really a story guy. Like, I like metaphors and I like imagery, but for me, the short story, certainly the fictional short story, or what I'd call the moral tale short story, or the morality play, is not for me. For me, I like the direct, philosophical work related to sort of a concept by concept summary of the essential points. Drawing that all out into like this play, or this morality play where there's lessons to be learned. To me, it's just not time efficient. Uh, I don't, that's not the way I learn. If storytelling is fine to a point, for example, I'm fine with examples in books that are maybe a paragraph or 2 paragraphs long, maybe 3 paragraphs long. But if it's any more than 4 paragraphs, you're stretching it. You know, the author is stretching it. So for me, these lengthy books, about true to life or reality stories based on true stories, I'm just not into it. Sorry. um, I like the vignettes, the really short vignettes, but the longer vignettes, they just, it tries my patience. And there's also a lot of analysis. It almost gets too complex if it gets too long. Just show me an illustrative point. I just illustrate a point for me about some concept or abstract idea, and I'm good. I'm good. And if you can't explain it in a few paragraphs, this idea, um, maybe the author doesn't quite understand this idea as much as they think they do. So yeah, I've never really read a Chicken Soup for the Soul book, and I'm fine with that. I may never read a Chicken Soup for the Soul book, but here's the thing: I kind of know something about Jack Canfield. What I know is that he's a very successful editor, and I don't know how many of the books he's written, but I know he's arranged for many books to be written. And so in my mind, he is a successful self-help author, and really that is enough for me to go check him out and to go watch his presentation. And thankfully there's more. I mean, there's bonus, and that is he has a few pretty amazing ideas of his own, you know and I really enjoyed sort of the summary that he provided. He was speaking for a good 2 hours, and I was really pleased to be in the audience. I think he has a lot of important things to say, and I appreciate how succinctly he said it. I mean, it's really hard to summarize a lot of books and a lot of ideas in just a 1 2 hour session. So, my gratitude goes out for him for giving it a shot. And I think he really presented the information well. So you might be asking, well, what did this Jack Canfield talk about? Well, there were a few takeaways for me that were pretty substantial. Number one, I think the most important takeaway was this idea of taking 100% responsibility for your life and for any outcomes in it. And, what intrigued me was just how seriously he took that statement, that 100% responsibility. And that's an idea I'm very familiar with. I've known about it for a long, long time. And it's funny how an idea like that's so common, that you're so familiar with, in a way you take it for granted sometimes, but it's really a powerful idea that, in my mind, requires a lot of thoughtfulness. Um, I think it's complex. Jack Canfield said that, when he talks about taking 100% responsibility for your life and outcomes, he's not talking about only taking 99% responsibility for your life and outcomes. He says 100%. And for me, while I find that idea intriguing and appealing in a lot of ways, I have difficulty sort of comprehending the scope of that claim. I think it might be a good idea, but I'm a little skeptical too. On the other hand, I like the idea of taking full responsibility, but at the I sort of have some confounding ideas about reality. Namely, that we live in a deterministic mechanistic universe. And so how do I square with this idea of taking responsibility with this idea of determinism in the universe? And really, how responsible can you be for your life when you don't have free will necessarily? you know, these are quandaries that I'm puzzling over. And what does it even look like? Like, how do you know? Is there an objective test that you can take that would sort of indicate that you're taking 100% responsibility for your life? It almost seems like too heavy a burden. Like, you know, I I try out a lot of things. I do a lot of experiments throughout the day. Things about, experiments about what I'm eating and how I'm spending my time, people I'm meeting, I'm always guessing, is this what they mean? Is this what's going on? Is this happening? And the outcomes often not under my control, right? This is all about external reality. It's other minds. The problem of other minds is namely that other minds have freedom to operate as they operate, and I will have relatively little influence over those minds, over their operation. And it's something we all have to accept. This problem of other minds, and so what that means is, like, in the face of a universe where I don't have any control over my external reality, how can I take 100% responsibility for what happens? Well, really, I guess the answer is you take 100% responsibility for the beliefs that you're thinking at any moment in time. I mean, really, that's where your power is. That's where your strength is. As a human being, your strengths are in the ideas that you're believing, and the degree to which you believe those ideas, the intensity with which you believe an idea, that energetic backing, that's really where your power is. You can take it away for a belief that, say, has no evidence or has been proven false, or you know really, that's where your power is. It's how you pull the strings in your own mind, what beliefs you set up, what beliefs you decide to believe, and what beliefs you decide to disbelieve. And really, that's where people get their power, and that's how you take 100% responsibility for your life. But you know what? Even that is a challenge. The human brain confounds me every day, and I'm not entirely sure, like, what my next thought is going to be necessarily. It's not like I'm planning ahead. For example, I'm going to be talking to you for about an hour on this video. Now, do I know what I'm going to be talking about 30 minutes from now? And, what is the reliability of that prediction? And, can I truly be held responsible for this, real time streaming consciousness thinking? How much am I in control of it? Am I 50%? Is it 50% under my control? Is it 100% under my control? Is it 90% under my control? The answers to these questions are uncertain to me. I'm just not clear about it. And, I like the idea of taking as much responsibility as I can for my thinking. And here's the thing, a good part of my brain and thinking process is automatized. Like when I hop in the car and I'm driving around town, that driving activity, where I'm looking and how I'm looking, through what mirrors and such, a lot of that is automatized. It's been automatized over the last 30 years that I've learned how to drive a car. And you know what? I like that it's automatized, because I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about how to turn the steering wheel of a car, right? How much to turn it. I'd rather all of that be automatized. Stopping at red lights. I want all of that to be automatized. I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it. So I want those habitual patterns of thought to exist. So am I taking 100% responsibility for my automatized thinking? Well, I think there's a way that you can say that, over the period of the last 30 years, I've learned ways to drive, and I've made little decisions again and again and again that have been automatized. And in that respect, I do take 100% responsibility for my driving skills. But, there are other aspects of me, of my driving, that I just cannot take responsibility for. My, what is it? There are parts of my brain that pay attention, that through my subconscious awareness, pay attention to when lights turn green, yellow, and red. I might not be fully consciously aware of when a street lamp goes from green to red. You know, it, my thinking might be primarily in one place, but there's like these background processes that keep my brain tuned in to the green, yellow, or red nature of the stoplight. So do I have full responsibility? Am I 100% responsible for those thoughts? The automatized thoughts? The ones that happen in the sort of like the subconscious background? I don't know. So, I think it's a complex idea to say that I'm 100% responsible for everything that goes on. But, I like that idea because, hey, here's the bottom line. That idea is empowering, right? It's an idea that gives me at least it gives me impression, the impression that I have some control over my life, my external. Without that idea, without that confidence, I pretty much it's a losing game. So anyway, I appreciate that idea for what it is, and I think it can be helpful. It does make me think twice about when I make an assumption or a judgment about what's going on in my external reality. When I think of that thought, am I taking 100% responsibility? I am thinking twice about moral judgments I'm making about my shoulds, coulds, woulds, would'ves, as they apply to me. Shoulds, coulds, woulds, would'ves, as they apply to others. It does make me being thoughtful about, or am I just sort of succumbing to sort of the social mores of the day? Maybe I'm succumbing to being influenced by media on television or theaters or newspapers or books. Am I thoughtfully, rationally, critically making decisions about how I evaluate the world? Or am I just going with the flow, doing what other people are doing, making the same judgments they are, and just sort of, you know, sort of foisting that responsibility that ought to be on my shoulders onto other people? I don't know. So anyway, Jack Canfield did talk about that idea. I've written down a few other main points here. I've got it on my iPad Pro, and I might as well just bring them up. So, another point that he made was, I think, quite empowering, was this idea of doing 5 things, doing 5 actions to achieve your goals every day. And I really love this idea. It's actually very similar to an idea that I've had myself. One idea that has stuck with me for years is that if I ever have a question about how to do something, I always ask myself, how many books have I read on the subject? Like if I'm having trouble in a relationship or with a child, or I'm having trouble at work, or with a problematic thought, or with grief, I ask myself, how many books have I read on the subject? And I'm looking for an answer more than 1 or 2. I'm looking for like 5 books, and instead of just sort of sinking into hopelessness and helplessness because I don't have an answer to a problem, by asking myself how many books I've read on the subject, I remind myself that, if I don't know something, it's really behooves me to seek out a book and read a book about it. Whether it's a philosophical problem, say free will or existentialism, or whether it has to do with the problem of engineering, like what's going on with the National Electrical Code. I ask myself, how many books have I read about the subject? I think that really does a good job of putting my rear in gear, so to speak. Yeah. And so I'm just relating this idea that my idea about reading books is very similar to this idea where he says, do 5 things every day to meet your goal. And now, of course, these ideas are actually different, but they're somewhat analogous. I like the idea of doing 5 things every day to reach your goals. A lot of people have goals, established goals, and days and weeks and months go by and there's no action taken on these goals. And you know, sometimes that those actions don't need to take place immediately, but eventually you're going to want to take some action. And I like this idea of trying to do it 5 times a day. That reminds me of another point that was from the book Awaken the Giant Within with Anthony Robbins. Anthony Robbins, if I recall, talked a lot about massive action. And that's really what Jack Canfield is espousing now. He's talking about massive action, taking 5 actions a day to help you achieve your goal. And, I like that. I think that's a good standard. 5 key things every day. And, if you could do something like the X effect, I don't know if you're familiar with the X effect, but essentially you take this box of squares, like a tic-tac-toe box, and you check how many days in a row you have performed a certain act. And the idea is to get as many X's in a row as you can before breaking the trend. Before breaking the trend where you have a day where you're not accomplishing that chosen action. So, yeah, that would be an amazing thing. If I could take my goals and just do 5 actions to get me closer to each goal per day, I mean, that I can only imagine how much progress I would make. I mean, that'd make phenomenal progress on my goals. But of course, what that also requires is lots of time and lots of brainstorming and planning about what actions you're choosing to take in any one day. And sometimes you can't even take an action because, well, the ball's in some other person's court, right? Yeah. So, I really like that idea of taking 5 actions to achieve your goals today. While I was at the Jack Canfield conference, one thing that came to mind that was really, I think, an essential understanding of me and my own psychology was that I actually don't have a lot of goals. And the goals that I do have are not well formed. They're not SMART goals, so to speak. They're not specific, measurable, et cetera, et cetera. So, I figure, if I walk out with anything from this Jack Canfield lecture, I really need to walk out with the idea that it's important to have goals and to establish what they are. Thankfully, since last night, I have written down in my trusty notebook 2 goals, 2 big time, big fat hairy goals. They're actually not really big goals, but I got that written down. And as a bonus, I also wrote down my purpose, what I think my purpose in life is. And I just heard I think I just heard the sound of your ears perking up about your curiosity related to what my purpose is. Well, I'd be happy to share with you the information. So I have been thinking about what my purpose is, and I think I've got it down to a sentence. It's not a complete sentence, but I got it down to a sentence. And here it is. Quote, authentic conversations and learning activities. I know that seems pretty basic, pretty general for a life purpose, but I think that's uh, here is an elaboration, a more elaborate sentence, that my purpose is, quote, connecting and learning and affirming with my circle of friends or people while enjoying our transparency and resilience. So anyway, that's what I wrote down for sort of description of my purpose, my life purpose, which really, let me tell you, it really is just an expression of what I enjoy doing. Clearly, I enjoy meeting new people, having conversations with them, and learning from them. And I also enjoy, learning together in some kind of, maybe a school setting, or really just any kind of setting at all. I find that very pleasurable. That's a big part of where I get the pleasure in my life. And that's why I enjoy going to the library and hanging out with people, having conversations, going to lectures and museums and things like that. And I think I like those things mainly because, well, first of all, they give me pleasure, and they also it also lines up with my values, right? I've got a lot of values around learning and um, appreciating and creativity and happiness, things like that. So, hey, I'm really glad I boiled it down. And here's actually one of the most gratifying things I learned from this practice of sort of identifying my purpose. The most gratifying thing is I learned that I'm doing it already. Thank goodness. I can only imagine the sadness of people who discover what their purpose is and only find out just then that they're doing the wrong things, that they need to change their job, that they need to change how they spend their free time, that they need to change this and that. I have figured out my purpose. I'm pretty sure it's really strongly around these areas. It's somewhere in these areas. And I'm finding that I already do it. I already spend hours and hours and hours trying to relate to people and their ideas, and certainly relating to myself and growing and learning from the experience. That's what I do anyway. So, what this sort of under, deeper understanding about my purpose, it allows me, what is it? What it provides to me is this wonderful sort of opportunity to apply even more energy toward my purposeful action, my purpose, and therefore help generate more happiness in my life. Oh yeah. So I'm excited about doing this work related to my life purpose. I'm excited to find out that I'm pretty much doing it anyway. And then I'm also excited to sort of redouble my efforts to fulfill my purpose in even greater measure so that I might enjoy more happiness in the future. I mean, wow. If I could do even, say, apply 10% more energy into achieving my purpose, then that'll just make me 10% happier. I'm pretty convinced of that. So it's pretty wonderful. So thank you, Jack Canfield, for helping me sort of readdress or re-explore this idea about my purpose. And let's see, what else? What other takeaways from the presentation did I walk away with? So here's an idea. Broadcast your goals to as many people as possible. Now, this is essential. You know what? It's hard to do. I think this is probably one of the hardest things to do in the recipes and ideas that Jack Canfield put forth today or last night. Here's the thing. When I'm completely in line with my purpose and, I've identified a goal, it's such a personal thing. It's so essential for me that I achieve this goal. I don't want to tell anybody because I'm afraid of people's negative interpretations, negative judgments. I'm afraid of the no's. I want to keep it hidden and secret. That alone makes it really tough for me to achieve my goal because pretty much 100% of my goals so far are goals that involve other people. Right? It involves their cooperation, their partnership. It involves me being able to influence their decisions. It's these goals are not goals in isolation. It's not like these are not goals that are basically consist of me being on an island somewhere. These are goals of me living in a community of people. And oh boy, someone is having a party. Do you hear that ranchero music? It is going. I can actually feel it I can feel it vibrating the walls in my living room. And there's an announcer making announcements. Oh man, someone is having a party. Okay. So the question is, am I going to continue? Yes, of course I will. Of course I will. I will persist. All right. And you'll have this lovely background of music going on at the same time. Something I did not really account for. Something that just popped up in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Anyway, it's a catchy tune. What can I say? let's do a waltz or a polka. All right. So anyway, it's kind of funny too because my brain is sort of keyed in to music right now. I'm like really enjoying music. I'm having a blast downloading music selections from iTunes. Although, I'm not sure I'm even using iTunes. I'm using some music software on my Apple iPad Pro. And I'm sending you regular sort of summaries of some of the songs that I'm enjoying. And I hope you're enjoying that music too. Maybe getting some musical ideas, creative musical ideas. For me, I just love listening to music and sharing that music, sharing my playlist with other people. That's a big part of my purpose too. I'm all about expressing myself authentically and learning from the responses and learning from the experience. Yeah. So, oh yeah, I was mentioning that the music might be a little distracting for me because, my mind is like all into music lately. I've just been listening to a lot of it. And so my mind is really keyed in onto the beat. So if I start rocking like this, you'll know why. Right? Oh yeah, it's Miguel's subconscious. It's really grooving to that music. So let's see what other takeaways that I have from Jack Canfield's presentation. I had all kinds of stuff to say. The one that I rested on there for a second was broadcasting your goals to as many people as possible. I was just mentioning just how difficult that is because quite often, those goals are important to me, and I don't want to lose them. Right? I grab hold onto them, and I don't want to be thwarted. Oh, here's a funny thought. Jack Canfield said that that we should all be an ask hole. That's what he said. He called it an ask hole. He says, ask for what you want. Of course, I'm definitely an advocate of that. Sometimes it's not easy to express what you want to others, particularly if it means a lot, whether you get it or not. Which I was just touching on. But there was this additional idea. He said that if you get denied during an ask, you are in a position no worse than you were originally, which I found a really enlightening idea. So let's say I've got my whole weekend clear, and I want to do something. I want to go out with someone and maybe ask them on a date, right? So, initially I have no plans for the weekend. I ask someone out on a date, they say no, right? I've been denied. And the end result is that I still have nothing to do on the weekend. So, do you see how my situation didn't change at all? I think for me, that's a profound revelation because I want you to know that on some level, I was thinking that if I asked somebody and they said no or they denied me, I have this really powerful feeling that somehow I would be worse off and not the same. I kind of have this feeling that I might be worse off than if I than if I asked and got denied. And you know what? That's just not the case. You are no worse off. In fact, I would say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you are no worse off. And so, wow, that to me, that's like this huge courage pill. Like, this is like permission to be brave, right? To ask as much as I can of the people around me because, well, if they say no, that's okay. I mean, it won't change anything. And that realization is really important to me. It's really powerful to me. And, I'm pleased to know about that. I think I'm going to feel a lot less inclined to sort of constrain myself when asking questions about the people. And I know, Emily, you're probably thinking, oh, geez, my dad asked me to do stuff all the time, multiple times a week. And he's going to be asking more? Well, maybe I will. Maybe I will. All I have to say is sorry in advance. Sorry in advance. Oh, man, that music is it's just there, man. Someone is having a party right now, a serious party, probably not more than 50 feet away from me. Okay, I'm going to power through this video. So let's see, what other thing did Jack Canfield talk about? So he had this equation. He called it E plus R equals O. And that means events plus response equals outcome. So what he means by that is that, at first you start with the event, right? And then you add your response, and whatever it could be a behavioral response, like a physical response, or it could be like a response related to your thinking. And whatever the combination of the event and your response are, well, that's your outcome. And I kind of like that equation. I think it makes a lot of sense. Really, so essentially what it means is that your outcome is greatly dependent on what your reactions are to your external reality. So in other words, you can have really bad outcomes if your reactions are very poor. But it's up to you. You could have really fantastic outcomes if your responses are really great. And it's in a way, the event is kind of this neutral thing that just happens, right? It's just, what is it? Is it a hurricane? Is it a flood? It's just this neutral event that is it a car going 60 miles an hour? Is it a sunny day? That is the event. And then your response is just, your physical and emotional response. What you decide to do with your body, what you decide to do with your mind, your thinking, your beliefs. And that will create your outcome, right? So what that means, I think that's a really empowering kind of equation. And the reason is because no matter what your event is, if you respond in a way that's positive and helpful, the outcome will only be good. And what I like about that idea is that it sort of neutralizes this idea of events always being bad. Like, oh, if someone dies, that's always a bad thing. Or if a person gets a divorce, well, that's always a bad thing. Or If someone becomes a quadriplegic, then that's always a bad thing. Or if someone gets cancer, that's always a bad thing. You know, that kind of thinking is just not true. There's a lot to be said for our responses about in the world. And if your response is, no matter what the event, your response can sort of change the outcome, and make it really positive. It basically neutralizes this idea of innately negative events. Yeah, it actually makes negative outcomes conditional. You know, you could turn even an earthquake into this amazing tale of heroism and bravery and maybe even self-sacrifice or generosity. And it actually doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't. The events that take place don't actually have an impact on what the outcome is going to be. I mean, they may, what I'd call, trigger an impact, but it's not that outcome is not necessarily determined. I mean, but just by the event itself. It's also really determined by your reactions to the event. And I like that. That's a really empowering view. I think that's a powerfully empowering view. And I want to think more on that question. And, in a way, it's almost like a challenge. Like, how can I turn around any event and make the outcome better than I expected? In a way, it's a challenge to me to do something like that, to, really focus on how I could turn things around. What's the turnaround for that event? What's the turnaround for this event? How can I make it a brilliant accomplishment no matter what happens in my external reality? So, pretty exciting stuff. So let's see, what is another taking away? So another takeaway is this idea of focusing on what you want and not what you don't want. So it turns out that Jack Canfield is this big proponent of the law of attraction. Now, I myself think the law of attraction is real in certain ways. I don't necessarily think that that the universe has a personality, or in a supernatural way makes things happen because of the thoughts in your mind. No. I think that for me, the law of attraction has a reality as it relates to just regular natural brain processes, thinking processes that relate to things like, the brain's penchant for focusing on negative ideas, the brain's penchant for confirmation bias, the brain's penchant for being suggestible. So that's how the law of attraction happens. So, in other words, like if I want something to happen, if I spend a lot of time thinking about what I want to happen, that'll prime my brain, its suggestibility, to help me see that, or at least project that thing, making it happen in some respects. The brain's confirmation bias will, if I'm looking for something in the world, I'll find it. It also sort of uses like the brain's reticular activation system. It's sort of, the reticular activation system is this part of the brain that sort of, like, if you buy a Volvo, when you're driving out on the street, all you see is Volvos, right? That's the reticular activation system. It's picking up on cues in the environment based on sort of like the dominant ideas in your mind. And, that's just a regular biological process. Here's an example. There's a poster and you're looking for, say, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, or what's that? What's the name of that guy that is lost in a crowd? I forget his name. And you're supposed to pick him out of the pages of a book, out of a picture. I forget. Where's Waldo? So yeah, that's the reticular activation system. You focus your mind on looking for a certain pattern, and your mind will pick it up. It's essentially also the same skill related to putting puzzles together. I don't know if you've ever put a jigsaw puzzle together, but the reticular activation system is looking for subtle patterns, and it picks up on these patterns in your puzzle so that you can put the pieces in the right place. There's a part of your brain that's completely focused on just doing that, making matches between your thoughts and your external reality. And so for me, that is the law of attraction. So what I'm basically doing is I'm creating what I'd call a biological basis for the law of attraction. There are other aspects of the law of attraction that I think have a biological basis as well. It's not just confirmation bias. It's not just suggestibility. It's not just reticular activation system. It's also the mirroring of neurons, mirror neurons. Again, for example, let's say I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm sort of expressing a certain state, right? I'm signaling certain states. My emotional state, for example. The other person who I'm speaking with, their mirror neurons are receiving information about my emotional state and mirroring, and when we're mirroring each other, these mirroring neurons are how human beings communicate, how we've communicated non-verbally for millennia. And it's also just another expression of the law of attraction. And it is another aspect of the biological basis of the law of attraction as I understand it. So there are a lot of these sort of aspects of brain and behavior that account, and I would claim account for 100% of the law of attraction phenomena, which I believe exists. Now, I must admit that there is what I'd call a spiritualistic interpretation or interpretation of the law of attraction. I don't hold that at all. There is intertwined in the thinking about law of attraction. There are these ideas that are very hyper spiritualistic. This whole idea about, there are unfortunate metaphors. This whole idea about the universe being a genie, or how thoughts and prayers have power, right? How just ideas have power, like blessing people and praying for stuff. That stuff isn't real. Because it's the spiritual magic of the idea or whatever. Yeah, in my view, that isn't real. Now, that's not to say that prayers don't work, and that curses don't work, and that blessings don't work. They just don't work for spiritual reasons. They work for strict biological reasons, for reasons that are well explained in sort of like the biological theory of how human brains work. So anyway, I guess that's the point I want to get across. I don't have this spiritual belief system relating to the law of attraction. For me, it's very mechanistic, and there are operations in the brain which create these law of attraction effects that almost seem miraculous. Like, what? Here's an example. The brain is highly suggestible. By the way, people can get hypnotized by hypnotists. Hypnotism is a thing. It's real, and it's not magic. It's just how the brain operates. And so the brain is very suggestible. And so it's really hyper suggestible. So all it takes is a well-chosen word, a well-chosen environment, and like a certain string of thoughts, like a domino effect, take place. And there you go. Things happen. Like if I'm just dreaming of coffee, for example, I might either one take action to get myself my own cup of coffee, or I might take special note of when someone offers me coffee, and instead of ignoring the offering of coffee. I might take special note of it and think that it's significant that someone has offered me coffee and just pay extra attention to it. It doesn't have anything to do with sort of the spiritual nature of the universe. It actually just has to do with human psychology. And I can imagine having a conversation with someone, not even mentioning coffee, and having that person sort of get the message that I want a cup of coffee, just based on word choice, based on the subject matter that we're talking about, based on our context and where we're pointed, and what we're looking at, what's in the background, maybe sort of the subtext of our conversation. I can imagine our conversation being led to coffee, where my host might offer me a cup of coffee because of it, without me making a direct request for a cup of coffee. So this happens. This kind of stuff happens all the time. It's just normal human nature. It's just the biological basis of the law of attraction. Now, let me also state that I don't think that there is anything in particularly morally good. This is all happening in a morally neutral type environment. I think something I've said many times before is I think nature is neutral. So I'm not saying that people are good or bad, or this law of attraction stuff will help you or hurt you necessarily. It's just stuff that's always happening in the background. Stuff that's continuously happening, that a person can gain some modicum of control over if they choose, if they do it in an intelligent way. It really, if you really want to make use of the law of attraction, you can do things like learn a little bit about neuro-linguistic programming and anchoring thoughts, how to trigger anchors, how to create anchors, how to control your states, do state control, do self-hypnosis. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to help utilize the law of attraction in your life. And really just talking about what you want goes a long way toward making things happen. Here's a fact. People like helping other people. I know I like helping other people. I like being generous. And when someone says that they want something and I know how to give it to them, it brings me pleasure to enable them to get it. Absolutely. And the more direct they can be with me about what it is they want or desire, what their goals are, or what's important to them, the easier it is for me to sort of give it to them, help them achieve their goals. And so anyway, I guess enough about that law of attraction stuff. So anyway, I'm going to start wrapping things up, Emily, and I just want to say thank you for bearing with me while I talk with you a little bit about Jack Canfield. I really had a good time last night. I met up with a lot of great people, and I made some solid connections with people. This is stuff that I love to do. I took the initiative in a lot of my conversations, making requests and breaking down barriers and taking photographs of people. And I actually did not walk away with too many photographs myself, but I did do some urban photography. And maybe I'll show you some of those pictures, maybe not. Anyway, I hope you are having a wonderful day today, a wonderful Saturday. And I hope that you have a wonderful Sunday coming up tomorrow. I hope that your spring break is unfolding the way you want it to be unfolding. I was just in Walmart today, and I saw that school supplies are on sale because school is about to start up again. It's late July already, and I think a lot of schools start in August, and so you'll be beginning your sophomore year of high school, and so that's totally cool. And I hope that my latest gift of an iPad Pro laptop computer or tablet computer will serve you well as you return to school and revisit your friends. And I hope all of that technology helps bring you greater happiness. And I hope the music available and the information available that you get through that tablet computer is just makes your life more wonderful, because that's really what my goal is just to support you as best I can, as best I know how, as best that you will allow me to. And we'll go from there. I'll talk to you later, girl. Have a wonderful day and have a good night.